Good morning. Thank you very much for the organizers of this important meeting. Especially thank you to Professor Nimish. It was a pleasure to collaborate with you. I will focus on this in my presentation on one particular complex system, the Earth's system. I would like, first of all, to dedicate my talk to Moroccan economist Mahdi Elmandjra, a futurologist. Since this year marks the 10th anniversary of his passing away. He was a very close friend. Mahdi Elmandjra is a very popular intellectual in Morocco, in Africa, and in many countries of the global or the New South. Complexity is a term that is used widely today. Many definitions can be proposed for it, as it is the case with ample concepts such as intelligence, consciousness, or culture. The success of the term complexity can be attributed to the transformation of our societies, their artifacts, and the acceleration of time brought by the digital revolution. Some people rightly criticize the use and misuse of the word complexity to describe everything and its opposite. It's complex may naively mean it's complicated. First, nuances. A Swiss watch and an Airbus plane are complicated, not complex objects. The brain, the immune network, and the internet are complex, not complicated systems. It's also important to mention that complexity, as studied by scientists, is fundamentally problem-oriented. As such, it serves as a keyword for this century, allowing us to comprehend, summarize the generic patterns and the signs of our times. The scientific approaches to complexity are fascinating to explore and contribute to a perspectivist vision of the world and reality. These approaches have been enriched by rigorous studies in biology, physics, mathematics, and computer science. Although this development began in the 1960s and 70s, it was built upon the early discoveries of the 19th century that revealed certain limits to reductionism, linearity, and predictability. Although complexity reveals a form of rationality that is no longer reduced and narrowed, but extended, it is neither a contemporary myth nor a mystical or theological quest for understanding reality. It is rather an attempt to scientifically implement this extended, broader rationality by objectivating links, nodes, and folds of reticular biochemical filaments and intertwined physical matter. Complexity generally starts from a geological bedrock, a biological background, or a chemical soup, and observe the empirical evolution of rudimentary entities that aggregate into phenomena characterized by pure immanence. These are formed through an ascending process involving reticular projections, rhizomatic growth patterns, and collective behaviors, each one richer than the last. At each level of a system, we observe an increase in collective power and the emergence of supplementary properties that become difficult to explain or completely vanish as soon as we attempt to analyze them at a lower level. The main physical properties that enable the development of such levels of complexity are non-linearity, when causes and effects are not proportional, emergence, when the whole is more than the sum of its parts, and evolution, when the irreversibility of time serves as a catalyst for novelty. To clarify, we can offer a minimalist definition of complexity based on these three characteristics. History of science can be itself viewed as an evolutionary and contingent journey, becoming progressively complex with an alternance of straight lines and bifurcations. For instance, for over 2,000 years, it was believed that only one unique type of geometry existed, Euclidean geometry. But new geometries, new geometries were discovered in the 19th century that led to remarkable scientific advancements. For example, non-Euclidean geometries such as elliptic and hyperbolic ones were decisive in the elaboration of Einstein's groundbreaking proposition of the curvature of space-time. This idea, introduced at the dawn of the 20th century, marks the first step in his theory of general relativity, one of the most important scientific theories ever conceived. Other strange geometrical objects initially regarded as mathematical monstrosities, such as the piano and Koch space-filling curves, demonstrated at the same period unique properties related to their dimensions, continuity, and iteration. These objects are the first example of fractal geometry, which was later developed with the help of the computer and became closely associated with complexity and chaos theory. The world is not flat, and we are eminently non-Euclideans and non-linear. Thinking in terms of complexity may help us to produce a geometrical expression and a combinatory exploration of human existence within a disturbed biosphere. How can we pave the plane without saturating or depleting it? How can we refill and inhabit our terrestrial space and time to avoid the worst of possible worlds? If we understand the notion of complexity not just in terms of interwoven and intertwined elements, but also, as the etymology implicitly suggests, in relation to the concept of folding, a term derived from complexity, to fold together, leading to words like multiplicity, explication, implication, complication, etc., we may improve our situation regarding this harmonious deployment and unfolding in space and time. In geometry, the question of filling or recovering a surface by repeating one or more shapes without overlaps or gaps is a difficult and profound problem. The physicist Reda Benkirane proposed a technical solution for tiling the plane using only two shapes. A study published in 2007 in Science Review showed that medieval Islamic designers applied geometrical tiling patterns 500 years before penholes. The Giri design, created by ordinary tilers from Herat and Isfahan, applied the penholes technique by using 5 basic geometric shapes to produce complex decorative patterns without any overlap or gap. This serves as an example of a challenging mathematical problem that can be better understood through its deep simplicity and where medieval tilers enlightened us on how to proceed. From a geophysical perspective, the challenges humanity faces in this century reflect these geometrical difficulties related to tiling the plane. An increasing number of scientists, particularly those working on climate change and global warming, consider that our way of filling and inhabiting our Earth leads to a systematic form of conception of space and time. We are running low on time, space, resources, energy. This poses an existential dilemma for humanity. What kinds of agency can deal with our multiplicity, considering the shrinking of space and time, the finiteness of the biosphere? Can we inhabit the planet differently from the prevailing civilization of the last 500 years? Can we find or discover new geometrical agencies? We can already predict with certainty that for the better, but more probably for the worst, the next post-Western civilization will be planetary or will not exist at all. Ibn Khaldun, the 14th century North African author of an introduction to universal history, created a concept to define what civilization is. The Arabic term Umran has the etymological root Amara, that means either to fill or to last. This concept of Umran defines civilization as a particular way of treating space and time as a manner or pattern for filling these dimensions. According to Ibn Khaldun, a civilization exhibits a complexity with a distinct duration. It emerges, grows, flourishes, matures, declines, and ultimately dies, paving the way for a new civilization to arise. In his word history, Ibn Khaldun inserts these cycles into a dialectics of civilization which oscillates between nomadic, rural ways of life, Umran Bedawi, and sedentary urban lifestyles, Umran Hadari. This notion of Umran provides a historical insight for our times, except that we are witnessing a sudden and complete change in the dialectics of civilizations, where the cycles of rural, urban, nomad, sedentary are all overlapping and amplifying an overflowing urbanization of the world, the proliferation of cities, the extension of mega and metapoles. This invasive way of filling space and time has culminating in a global issue of centration and concentration, of growth and outgrowth. The biosphere is impacted by our activities and artifacts and our overuse of vulnerable and depleted resources like air and water. Science indicates that the sixth biological mass extinction is man-made, and our plastic waste has created a seventh continent covering millions of square kilometers in the North Pacific. After having pursued exponential economic growth and treated nature as a commodity, we must confront a hard problem which I refer to as a restrictive geometry. How can we tie the plane and do much better with much less? On this equation, joining modern civilization and the planet as a limit to human hubris, the very first scientific report warning about the dangers of endless economic, industrial, and demographic growth was undertaken by the Club of Rome in 1972. It publishes a historical report under the univocal title, The Limits to Growth. This report was produced by the team of researchers from MIT. These scientists developed the first significant formal model of the Earth's system, relying on MIT's established methodology to understand the dynamic behavior of a complex system, the so-called system dynamics. Through computer simulation and modeling, the MIT team studied the behavior of the planet system through 5 key interacting factors that are subject to exponential growth. The report had an unprecedented international echo with its conclusion that the limits to growth on this planet will be reached sometime within the next 100 years. The report showed that economic growth does not equate to progress. It is the first significant modern alert on the necessity to change our way of life. It aimed to prepare people for the transition between growth to global equilibrium. What happened and is still unfolding in this century was not anticipated by the Club of Rome's report. We have given up any hope of reaching a global equilibrium. We found out that we have disturbed the climate with human-caused carbon dioxide emissions and other greenhouse gases, fossil fuel combustion and industrial activities accounting for nearly 90% and deforestation for 10% of these emissions. Furthermore, if we add to these emissions the footprint of human and ruminant livestock population, we gain a concrete view of what is meant by the saturation of space and time. While human action can disrupt the climate, they cannot regulate it. According to a report published last September by the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research, the great acceleration which began in the 1950s due to the exponential growth of human industrial and agricultural activities has now surpassed 6 out of 9 planetary fundamental boundaries. These planetary boundaries are scientifically defined and correspond to, I quote, 9 established limits within which humanity can safely operate, maintaining the Earth's system, environmental stability, resilience, and life support function. The planetary boundaries, which include climate change, freshwater, and stratospheric ozone depletion, are highly interconnected and interdependent. A seventh boundary, ocean acidification, is close to being crossed. Another scientific report published last October, it identifies several indicators referred to as planetary vital signs, which include ocean heat levels, glaciers, sickness, meat production per capita, and fossil fuel subsidies. According to the latest measurements, 25 out of 35 of these vital signs have already reached extreme records, both highs and lows, and some 28 feedback loops are reinforcing global warming, while fossil fuel consumption remains 14 times greater than that of solar and wind energy. So when we next say that the sky is the limit, it will otherwise mean that we have reached our ceiling. Nevertheless, the scientific approach to complex systems have not changed the mindset of rulers, decision makers, economists, and industrialists. After 6 assessment reports from the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, 28 COP meetings, hundreds of scientific reports, and thousands of scientific articles, little has changed. The pervasive impact of humanity on Earth, often referred to as the Anthropocene, does not have a technological solution. Still, too many believe, again, in the religious sense of the term, that sometime, somewhere, somehow, a technological breakthrough will save humanity from its modern demons. This bias, known as technological solutionism, is particularly strong among the technocratic elite and operates among managers, strategists, and economists as a form of magical thinking. Contemporary societies, whether in the north, south, east, or west, will evolve for better or worse in an adaptive landscape that is extremely volatile, uncertain, ambiguous, and complex. Today, catastrophes have become our new normality. These crises have been multiplied by the interdependent properties of the global system. We will have to learn how to survive and cope with them as ordinary events, each bringing countless cascading effects. Extraordinary events have become ordinary, and the highly improbable scenario would be the planet reaching a new global equilibrium. Humanity needs to adapt and do its best to mitigate the consequences of this serial catastrophic bifurcation. From this perspective, what is urgently needed is to reinvent the economy in the context of a disrupted biosphere and seek prosperity and progress independently from the classical talismanic pursuit of growth for its own sake. Economics is not an exact science, and its theories of scarcity and prosperity must be rethought entirely, as they are nowadays constrained by the limits of growth and the growth of limits. The axioms of the 21st century economy must be completely redesigned as an urgent program for survival under the current global warming. The word polycrisis is systemic, with an increasing risk of collective collapse due to geopolitical tensions, military spending, autocratic, populist, or even extreme right governance, along with social protests and unrest. Consequently, the changes needed to limit the consequences of climate disaster must also be systemic in nature. Until now, the elites have focused on certain parameters. But once again, the issue is fundamentally systemic. The COVID-19 pandemic, despite proving to be very limited in terms of danger and lethality, has demonstrated that world governance is capable of adopting systemic measures to slow down the world economy in response to a global threat. We often associate the notion of complexity with the phrase "more is different," which is the title of an article published by physicist Philip Henderson in 1972. What is meant by this statement? Through scientific inquiry, we have gained insight into how natural systems operate at different scales, revealing the interplay between wholes and parts by transforming mere quantities into subtle qualities. This is precisely what is at stake with the set of geophysical limits that are today the only data that count and on which our future depends. We are at the end of a civilizational cycle where a particular understanding of matter and life, along with its associated standards and values, has paved the way, the plane of every square meter of the planet's surface. We desperately need to adopt new ways of filling space and time, and the fusion of science and culture proposed by Moroccan economist and futurologist Mahdi Elmandjra may help us to invent or discover them. In a post-Western multipolar world, establishing a new productive relationship with knowledge should include different worldviews. The sciences that focus on patterns, qualities, and singularities may contribute to enhancing creative modes of becoming, encouraging people to engage in anticipating and participating in alternative futures. We need less to project than reflect possible dissolutions to the 21st century problem of Earth's limits. Mahdi Elmandjra, a member of the Club of Rome and a former president of the World Futures Studies Federation and Futurib International, believed that modernization should not have meant westernization, using Japan as an inspiring example of this distinction. For Elmandjra, cultural pluralism is essential for the future of humanity, and he was anticipating, I quote, a geopolitical rupture with the past and the role of cultural diversity in a pluralistic world where survival calls for the elimination of all forms of hegemony. Rather than being once more subjected to a hegemonic and transcendental perspective on knowledge, like the one identified in the More is Different article, the fusion of science and culture could provide us with a truly cosmopolitan outlook on our destiny. This cosmopolitan perspective may protect us from the empirical blindness caused by the perception of light coming from a single horizon, that of a dead star. Unsurprisingly, Mahdi Elmandjra was the co-author of another landmark report published by the Club of Rome titled No Limits to Learning, 8 years after the report, The Limits to Growth. In this book, Mahdi Elmandjra addresses the mounting challenge of complexity by focusing on how to bridge the human gap and unveil potentialities rather than merely highlighting the physical constraints to economic growth. The notion of lifelong learners has its origin in the seminal report that emphasized the importance of a comprehensive educational project, one that would engage individuals and society through anticipation and participation in innovative learning processes. Learning is a source of endless exploration and discovery. The challenge lies in involving lifelong learners, not only from elite circles, but from society at large, in an anticipation that the futurologists consider as solidarity in time and participation as solidarity in space. Geometry of the future. Let us build on these arcs of solidarity and learn how to inhabit the world and create planetary leadership. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Benkirane, for this thought-provoking and insightful keynote talk. Probably we can pick one or two questions from the audience. Any questions? Yes. Mike, please.
Thanks for the very interesting, inspiring talk. I'm Masaf Nabashi from Japan. Before I worked in France in École Polytechnique, and I knew your name actually. And I really appreciate you point out really the myth of technology that they could address the complicated problem, but not actually the emergence of complex system that we really need to feel the future space-time towards sustainability. And yet the very essential challenge lies in how I believe that how we can actually connect this ecological complexity, planetary boundaries with today's highly developed technological societies. And I'm also working for that. But do you have any particular domain or not necessarily technology, but social movement? Maybe the economist you mentioned has been talking about it, taking Japan as a reference, which is my honor. But could you specify a bit more on what kind of new cultural scientific body that we have to invest in the future? What kind of cultural or scientific bodies that we have to invest more in the future?
Okay, shall I answer it? Yeah, I'm inclined to answer to say that we need really a pluralistic worldviews. We should engage all people, all actors. I said right from the beginning that complexity approaches have not changed the mindset of rulers, of decision makers, etc. But we may find hope at the level of the grassroots organizations, citizens, institutions. You know, there's a lot of things that are doing, and we need to connect these seeds, the different seeds. So, and even that, we should not focus on the sci-tech approach. I'm very sensitive to what is proposed in terms of thinking by traditional societies, indigenous societies. You know how they can summarize our 500 years of civilization through 3 words. They are able to summarize what is capitalism or what is this global civilization through 3 words. For traditional societies, like the one in Latin America, in Africa, in Asia, they say that they have been victims of 3 main problems: extermination or enslavement of species, of living species, human beings, but not only, you know, threat to you know, the biodiversity, colonization, not only colonization of people, but colonization of as everything. See also that our devices as a form of colonization, we are colonized by the technological device today. We are, and we are also enslaved. This person. Third one, extractivism. The idea that we have the resources of the planet should be extracted and exploited. And these traditional societies are now proposing solutions that we are discovering through, you know, soft therapy approach in ecological sciences. So my response, immediate response, no one is capable of providing a whole global view of what is happening. We must take into consideration a perspectivist approach. We share the same vision. It's the same unique world, but we have a perspectivist approach. And we should include this diversity of worldviews, include the actors. So, and not only the elite, scientific elites, but consider what the civil societies are doing also.
So otherwise, thank you so much again for your insightful talk, Professor.